Okay, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. We are getting a very late start today. I've got to stop doing this. Our late start is due to, as usual, technical difficulties. But today we're talking about monuments, and this was Che's suggestion. So Che, thanks for suggesting.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, hopefully what we'll do is we'll have Morgan popping in here any second. But fingers crossed. So, did you have something specific in mind when you were talking, when you were suggesting the topic, Jay? Why don't you let me know?
Well, I was just I was listening to an audiobook, and I don't know how it came up, but I was thinking about like what people, what governments, what cultures, what countries choose to sort of memorialize. And, you know, be it a person or an event. And I just thought that seems like a really rich topic, and it seems like it does make its way into spec fic, but I almost sort of feel like not quite enough, because there's because monuments also become not just the thing itself, but also like landmarks. You know, you're like, oh, this is 5 blocks from this thing, or meet me at the Arc de Triomphe, or you know, whatever it happens to be. So it's like, you know, and then because it's mostly, it's like twofold, like the thing itself, what you choose to point out, what your country, and it is usually countries or leaders, it seems to be, are the ones who kind of designate monuments, and then there are like smaller groups can finance things.
Yeah, well, you've got everything from giant statues to like little tiny plaques and stuff, right?
Right, yeah. I mean, there's everything to like, you know, like the bench, like the local bench named after somebody.
Local bench, yes.
You know, but I mean, it's maybe monument should also denote like size.
Yeah.
So maybe a memorial is something else, and just a size-wise.
Yep. So I did a little reading before this topic to kind of find out. I had to ask myself the question: when were monuments first built? And it turns out they were built as early as 12,000 years ago. Basically in Turkey, we can find remnants of buildings which are clearly not houses, larger than houses, and clearly meant as a decorative and ceremonial supersized structure. So monuments been around, because I was thinking, first monuments, so they're probably going to be something like the ziggurats or the pyramids or Stonehenge. Like, no, it goes all the way back to 12,000 BC.
Wow.
10,000 BC, which suggests that's about the start of the Neolithic. So as soon as humans could build these things in any sort of way, we started doing it. So it must be something really innate to us to want to build to large size to commemorate kings, emperors, gods, goddesses, events.
Yeah, it's interesting too, especially because the amount of resources that must have been involved.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, it's all mostly muscle power. So it's like hundreds, thousands of people building these things. It's like that takes a minimal level of state level integration and organization, which
absolutely,
and just the will to build stuff. I mean, and then you start thinking about stuff that takes more than one generation to complete.
Right, like all of the Catholic
cathedrals. Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, 150 years to build them, that's 4 or 5 generations. It's like it's astounding. Just like what people will want to build when they get together to build a monument to something or some idea or some deity or something. It's like what motivates us to want to build to such weird scale? Is it immortality? Is it?
I think it is partially immortality. I think it's like the thing designated for the ages.
Well, I mean, I think also there's a I think also there's a value in just creating a focus point for a community, right?
A focus point or a use of labor. I mean,
yeah, like a community, like a like a joint project.
Well, yeah, I mean, from what I understand, a lot of the Egyptian monuments and buildings were built generally when the river was flooding, and you couldn't till your fields. So you had nothing to do. Like all these people lying around. So Pharaoh gets, okay, I'll build something. Give these people something to do, give them a chance to eat. So, like use the excess labor to memorialize something at great cost and expense. But you can still see the pyramids. They're the only one of the 7 wonders of the world left, but they're still there.
Yeah, which is pretty amazing when you think about it. I mean, I think about things like, well, gosh, okay, so like the Arc de Triomphe was built for Napoleon.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he was trying to mimic Roman arches, like the ones in Rome. So
yeah,
and which is an interesting side topic of its own. Like monuments that mimic other monuments.
Yeah, monuments that mimic other monuments.
Because I just heard about there's the ruin of a fallen obelisk in Rome that the Romans built to mimic Egyptian obelisks. That they already had stolen half a dozen of them, but they decided to build one of their own. But this one happened to fall down, so they mimicked the things that they themselves stolen and decided to make. Oh, we can make an obelisk too. And of course, there's the Pyramid of Cestus. You guys know the Pyramid of Cestus?
Tell us about it.
Okay, so it's a tomb in Rome. This Roman patrician Cestus decided he wanted a tomb like an Egyptian pyramid. So by golly, he built one. It sits in Rome. It's attached to the wall now. I went to see it. It's the most amazing, weird thing you will see in the city of Rome. This giant pyramid of limestone blocks sitting in the city. It's like, oh my God. A guy wanted to mimic an Egyptian pyramid. And he said, it's not the size of the Egyptian pyramid, but it's still a hefty, giant thing. I've seen it. It's like, yeah.
And see, that's the other thing. That's the other thing that I wonder about. That when you have something that's so big and so expensive, even if it's not expensive somehow in like money or resources, it's got to be incredibly expensive in terms of the labor of individuals, right?
Mm-hmm.
How? I guess in some sense you sort of you can have a situation where where is this money to build these things coming from, right? Or is it just the will that's there, right? Because like as you get into recorded history, you have people making other people build monuments for them, right?
Yep.
And you get these weird power imbalance situations where people are forced to build things for other people, right? And there's a lot of that going on.
That stuff is a cost because they're not producing food or anything else for the kingdom, the republic, or not. They're building your pyramid for you. So it's an opportunity cost lost.
Yeah. So, but the fact that they exist so early, you got to kind of wonder, was it a power imbalance thing at that point?
I don't know.
That's what I'm wondering. And it actually, I think it makes for a really interesting question to ask about the world building of the monuments, right? To say, okay, what are the circumstances under which a monument would be built, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Lord of the Rings. We've all seen the Fellowship thing. You see those 2 giant Argonaut statues.
Yeah, the Argonath. Yep.
It's just like, it's the will and the power to build that, and the effort it takes.
The money for the raw materials, and somebody has to. Large scale monuments, in particular, require architecture.
Mm-hmm.
Architecture, mathematics,
yeah,
geometry. Yeah.
And somebody has to sculpt those on a small scale, and then they're rendered large scale.
I'm up. Okay, so it's a terrible movie, but I like it anyway. It's called. Have you? Any of you seen Land of the Pharaohs?
No.
It's one of those 50s Howard Hawks movies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
it has some really questionable choices, but it's basically about a Egyptian pharaoh trying to build a tomb, and he gets someone who's not Jewish, but is Jewish to design his tomb for him, and they go through the whole process of years and years of building this thing, and the just monumental effort it is involved. I mean, it has really weird slanted politics, and it has an actress basically playing in brown face. It is terrible in many ways, but it shows because this is before CGI or anything, it just shows the monumental numbers of people and effort it takes to build something like that, and just how much it would drain and focus an economy on that one thing. This is all we're going to do. We're going to build these pyramids for a long time, and that's what we do. It's like a game of Civilization where, we're going to build the pyramids. You can't build your warriors, settle, or anything else. That's what you're building.
There's something to be said for team building, right?
That's on a years-long scale.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yeah.
Morgan.
So change browsers. Bear with me. My focus is a little off today. Video games have a lot to do with driving the advancement of computers, the hardware. The fancier the game, the more intricate the game, the more hard drive space you need, the more speed you need, the better graphics.
I see. So you're saying it drives the tech,
right? So, do these monuments, these huge projects that somebody imagined, are they based on existing tech, or did somebody say, I want this thing, and now we have to develop the tech and the structures, the infrastructure and the economy to make this happen, these education in building skills and architecture and engineering?
Well, probably some of both, right?
Yeah, I'm going to say both too, because it's like you start with what you know how to do, but then somebody's going to come along and innovate on some level, be it like a new style of arch or a better casting process or something.
Yep.
So
these are crappy graphics. Fix it. Make it better.
Yep. The Egyptian pyramids.
Animated movies. Think about what has happened with animated movies.
Well, like Egyptian pyramids started because before pyramids, they had these long bar-like tombs called mastabas. And the first pyramid is basically a couple of mastabas stacked on top of each other. It's called the step pyramid. And then they started trying to build real pyramids. The first couple didn't come out well. In fact, there's one where they got the angle wrong and had to fix it midstream. It's called the bent pyramid. And then they got to the actual real pyramids that we all know and love. So you could see the progression of the technology. They tried to get better and better pyramids, starting with the long tombs and getting to the actual, pyramid of Cheops. In the desert that we all know and love.
Look also at the way that there's another great example of this in the European cathedrals, because you've got one tower that is in one style, and then the other tower that was built later is a lot fancier.
Because they're still building the damn cathedral. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The technology and style changed in the midst of the gigantic project. That's hilarious.
It's so common, though.
You do see repetition of style. I mean, how many monuments in the U.S. look like Egyptian stuff? I mean, the Washington Monument itself is just a giant obelisk. It's just a really, really big obelisk.
Or look at state capitals and how many of them look very much alike.
So I think it's worth saying when we talk about echoing past monuments, it's not done randomly.
No.
It's often done in a deliberate evocation of a kind of majesty and grandeur that people have come to associate with past glories, right?
We are the new Rome. We are the new Egypt. We do it now. We do it better. sort of
Mhm.
thing. Like,
Yeah.
so capturing that magic by evoking those forms which we've seen before.
And
But at the
depending on the style that you choose, you can evoke all kinds of past interesting stuff. So when it comes to world building, you got to think very hard about what you're evoking, right? Because you can evoke anything from the ancient Egyptians to the communist revolution in China, to there's all kinds of historical stuff that you can evoke and will evoke without even trying, if your monuments in your world bear a similarity in the reader's mind to these other monuments. And that's powerful.
And then within your world, so you've chosen something. Is it original within your world, or is it itself harking back to something previous that they're trying to mimic in the world's history?
Are they capturing their own past glories?
Yep. Actually, I had an interesting project that I was set to over the weekend. I have a fellow working on a website for me, which I'm very excited about. And he was like, okay, so do the casts of Varan have symbols or insignias? And I was like, they ought to. Well,
ding, ding.
This is related because of the whole question of evoking one's own past. So one of the rules of Varan is that nothing in Varan can ever be completely uniform, ever. And so there are basically what I came down to over the weekend as I was sort of planning this out is like, okay, so one of the casts has an insignia that actually used to be a sign for something else. And it was actually a sort of a family crest even before that. So this thing, which has this form, is actually probably several hundred years older than you even think it was, right? And then you've got the highest group, which has an insignia, and it's like, when was that insignia invented? Okay, well, it was probably invented when all of the cities of Varan were actually brought together as one country. But that was still well before the existence of the social group that's now claiming this as its insignia, right? And so there are 7 total insignias. And so 2 of them have these very, very old sort of historical paths. And then the other ones were created at the time that this social group was established. And then you had the 2 groups at that point who were like, well, obviously this is our insignia, so we're going to use this. And then the rest of them were like, we have to have one too. So the rest of them are a lot more uniform and like have a certain sort of similarity to one another. Yeah. Which is only to say that one of them is actually a picture of a building, which is not exactly a monument, but it's the symbol for the cartoon and cast, which is the artisans and people who go to university and engineers and that kind of stuff. And it is an evocation of the sort of main building, sort of central building of the university. But that central building of the university is actually an evocation of what they think of as the sort of canonical university, the canonical place of learning.
The archetype.
Right. But their sense of the archetype of a place of learning is actually based on one of the first universities ever to exist in this world, which was lost like 1,000 years before anybody ever even set foot on the foreign continent. So like they're evoking a thing that they don't even understand anymore.
Wow. That's deep.
Which, you know, the thing about it is people do this, right? And so when I'm asked, oh, you know, come up with some insignias, I'm not just going to go, oh, well, you know, let's make some designs that look cool, right? Because that's useful in and of itself in a way, but when people actually come up with their own insignias, they have reasons for them. And so that was sort of my thought process in coming up with it.
Entwining Worldbuilding into insignias and explicating the past history. I love it.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's super fun too. So, you know, I don't even know if I'll ever get to the point where I can explain any of this on a page, right? But I know that at some point we're going to see the university. You know, at some point we're going to see the university, and when you see the university, the insignia will make sense. And you don't have to know about the previous 1,000 years of history before in order to go, oh, that's why it's that way. So, excuse me, Morgan, what are you saying?
If you look, well, it's not actually the case. MIT has 77 Mass Ave is their main address, and it's an iconic building.
Yeah.
And I recall seeing a sort of stylized version of it being used as sort of not a logo exactly, but as a
to sort of symbolize the school.
Yeah. So I went to the site to look, and I do not recognize anything over there. It's wow. So I'm not going to try to show you what it was. I'm just going to say that my recollection is that, you know, that it's Greek or Roman columns and dome, and it's I find it to be pretty recognizable, but then again, I went there and I lived in Cambridge and I lived in Boston. But that's
well, I think actually it's worth noting. It's worth noting that if you look at the way that TV news operates, for example, you can see that when a program is referencing a particular location, they will have like a stock shot of that location that they use to sort of symbolize it in the reader's mind. And you see this in movies all the time. Sorry, I'm just writing a note.
Well, the monuments are the most recognizable.
Right. So, like, for example, if people go Stanford, they show you Hoover Tower and the red and the tile roofs, right?
Paris gets the Eiffel Tower.
Paris gets the Eiffel Tower every single time. And if you actually see, if you actually see a film or you know, a music video or something that shows you parts of the city that are not iconic in this way, it's almost like there's something missing. You're feeling a little confused, right? Where are they? Is it important where they are? You know what I mean? So these kinds of monuments are more than just they become emblematic of the place in a larger context.
They become tied in with the idea of what that place is. Like for New York City, for a long time, it was the old World Trade Center, and before that, it was the Empire State Building. I mean, I'm not quite sure now what the emblematic for New York is. Is it the Empire State Building? Is it the new World Trade Center? I'm not certain anymore because in real short historical time, that's changed again and again and again. I mean, what building evokes New York?
Hard to say at this point. Yeah.
I mean, Jay, Morgan, what do you think?
I think it's the entirety of the skyline because that's always what it's been known for, despite the fact that the skyline changes. But
Skyline
there
is
are
definitely one.
there are enough recognizables. It's also, I think, some of the bridges, like they'll show you like the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yes. Oh, such a gorgeous bridge.
Yeah.
Well, there's also the statue.
Liberty.
Yeah.
Statue of Liberty.
Uh-huh.
That's 100%, and that's another monument.
Yep. That's another big monument.
From
to an
France,
idea.
mind you.
Yeah.
Yes, a gift from France.
They have one in Paris too. It's kind of amusing when you're
I
going
want
along the
to
city, you're
see
like,
this
"Hey,
one
I know
day."
you.
Yes, I want to see it.
Isn't it like the small it was like the mock-up almost
The
for the
scale model.
larger version.
Yeah,
and
it's not nearly as large.
and they still have the small one that they built as to like I say, you usually have to model these things before you produce large
Right.
scale. So
Okay, so that said, these can be really useful tools, right? I do wonder sometimes. I was just thinking about it actually on my way home today, going, Varn doesn't really have any monuments yet.
oh my god, I know. I haven't thought of any. I
But
was like
I mean,
thinking about that.
it's also cavern city, so like it, I mean, it has it's not as though it doesn't have any symbolic places. But I kind of do have to think that through. What is it that in the minds of the Varni symbolizes each of the cities? Because there's going to be something.
Yeah.
I
mean, there's often like statues are ever popular.
Yeah.
Battle memorials.
Yep.
Like the Vietnam Wall.
Yep.
There's that World War II one of the guys with the flags. I think it was for Iwo Jima, but I'm not 100% on that. Where it's like all the guys raising the flag.
Yeah.
That's a big statue somewhere. There are city founders. I know there was a big statue of, it wasn't that big, but it was a statue of Oglethorpe in Savannah. The guy who founded Georgia.
Yeah.
It's sort of a classic trope, actually, is these statues, the statue of the founder or the town hero, which is kind of interesting because most towns don't have a single founder, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't, how do you found a town all by yourself?
Geneva has the clock made of flowers.
Oh, yeah. Whatchamacallit? The state capital of Lexington of Kentucky, not Lexington. Frankfurt has that one too.
Really? A clock of flowers. That's cool.
A clock of flowers. I saw it a couple of years ago when I was passing through. Yeah.
So that was Lexington, Kentucky?
No, Frankfurt, Kentucky.
Frankfurt,
capital.
Kentucky.
Yeah, Frankfurt, Kentucky.
Oh, okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, that's the thing. It doesn't matter what your symbol is per se. Right? I mean, it kind of does, but it kind of doesn't. When you have something like a statue of the glorious leader,
all those statues of Lenin that
right. So there's definitely the glorious leader approach.
Yeah, I remember them because they were, it was all over the news where they were tearing them all down.
Well, that's exactly right. Because if you put up a statue of your glorious leader and then your glorious leader falls, what do you do with all the statues of the glorious leader?
Or or politics changes. Look at all the Confederate memorials that we're dealing with here in the States.
Well,
exactly.
And there's something when you set up a symbol, that symbol can become a target because it has become symbolic, right?
Yeah.
A target of revolution, target of political change.
Yeah.
I mean, the French Revolution, they did a lot of royalist buildings and monuments, and then when Napoleon got into power, he just started building all new ones like the Arc of Day Trump. It's like a cycle of stuff, and things survive. Some things survive, and other things are just melted down and remade anew or repurposed.
Right.
Or like, for example, going back to ancient Egypt again. I mean, or not even Egypt, ancient Rome, when they were building, when they were making statues of emperors, if the emperor died and you got a new emperor, they would basically change and resculpt the face for the new emperor, just use the body. Yeah, there's some really weird statues that just don't really resemble the emperor's body, but because they have the face, because they were making a statue in progress and they changed emperors.
Gee, that looks like his face, but I don't remember him being quite that muscular.
Exactly. It is the weirdest thing.
Sort of sculpture shop.
Yes, sculpture. Or just like taking a building and like, oh, we're going to repurpose it. Like a lot of Nero's stuff after he got repurposed or torn down because he had like nobody, because Nero had this golden statue of himself made. Like, no, we're not going to have that anymore. It's
well,
like,
you know, and this is actually such a great thing to be talking about because thinking about how the style that buildings get built in and the kinds of things that they're intended to symbolize, and then how they would get repurposed, and then maybe you wouldn't be able to pull out the tops of all of the columns to change the style of the capitals just because something changed about your aesthetic. And so all of a sudden the building is not just a building, but it's a symbol of something that has changed or has been lost. I mean, there's so many ways to leave Easter eggs in that way, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they started this building differently because you could see the capitals here, and then it changed.
Right, and also to create a sense of history in a place too.
Yes,
because that's as useful as having something to focus on, right?
Yeah, it gives a sense there's a depth that this society has evolved and changed what it finds aesthetically pleasing or is capable of building.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why you would want to have buildings of different ages in a city, to show that your city has been around for a while. And
there are even I just Googled this, ugly monuments, and there are whole lists of, you can go look at ugly, weird monuments at different places.
Oh, that's funny.
So like there's just like, like maybe somebody only paid for half the statue and got like a really crappy statue,
Yeah.
And then it just became this thing, right?
Well, because oftentimes these kinds of statues are very controversial when they're put up. I mean, I'm thinking of the Eiffel Tower, which was considered a complete eyesore by a lot of people when it was put up, but now is just become incredibly iconic, right? Yeah. There's another one like that in Paris, which is the glass pyramid of the Louvre.
I remember that. I remember them fighting over
it.
Yeah.
And of course now it's like, yeah, it's super famous.
yeah. I mean, I just saw, the Louvre's Twitter feed the other day was celebrating its construction. It's like,
yeah,
I kind of remember the stories that wasn't so like so much my time. Now it's beloved. I would love to see it myself one of these days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because they were like, this thing is horrible and it'll ruin Paris and it'll ruin the view and it'll ruin the Louvre and they're, how dare they? And
yeah, absolutely, all of that. and also there is this great statue, I happen to love it, of Quetzalcoatl in San Jose.
Really?
And everybody was like, oh, it's a giant turd. And I just think it's really cool. But obviously not everybody appreciates it the way I do. So, I mean, it's worth noting that these kinds of things draw a lot of attention, and so they aren't just sort of universally loved necessarily, right?
Yeah.
There's also two example. One example of like the not universally loved was the or like it's one of those sort of unfortunate things where like nobody gave it a second thought except for the people that it really damaged, which was Mount Rushmore.
Oh God, yes.
Which was originally the seven grandfathers, I believe is.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Is yeah, and then I remember looking at a map of like North or South Dakota for some reason, and finding that a mountain had been named after General Harney, who was one of the sort of they would call him what like I think the former Civil War or whatever, sent out west to basically Indian fighter was. And so but now he got this mountain named after him.
Yeah.
And then sort of on the opposite end are, I think, like sort of cute, funny monuments like that statue of the dog in Japan, the Hachiko. And then what?
Hachiko.
Hachiko, yeah. And then there's like, isn't there those like I keep seeing it, like people post, there was like somebody did a sculpture of a cat on a bench in Turkey to memorialize this rather fat cat that kind of sat on this bench like a person all the time.
Yeah.
And so I guess the cat must have died, and so they put up this statue in the same pose as the cat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I don't honestly know that much about the cat. I know that the Hachiko statue is treated very reverently. In Japan, and is not considered to be funny at all.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, I guess, yeah, okay.
No, I mean, let's.
But
just
there are like, I mean, there's monuments.
One similarity they might have is that they're both of animals, so that these don't.
Yeah, monuments to pets, I guess. Monuments to pets and animals.
Mm-hmm.
So monuments are not always just for people.
Nope. It's
and
worth pointing out.
I'm gonna say that there's probably more than a few statues of some general's horse out there.
Yeah. Usually with the general on top, but not always.
Yeah, usually sometimes, yeah, but like, you know, but there are monuments to animals. Lots of there's that one that's like the lab mice monument. It's a statue like dedicated to all the lab mice who've given their life to science.
Yeah. Where's that? I've not heard of that.
Well, I have been to a mouse and rat temple in Japan. But it didn't particularly have a monument, but it was a temple that was dedicated to being thankful for lab rats and mice who allow scientific advances to occur. And I went there with a friend of mine who was actually a scientific researcher in Japan, and she was very serious about her visits there. You know, so it was kind of cool. You know, it was nice to see that acknowledged. I did not want to. I don't want to move on completely because we're getting close to the end of our time, and I know we started late, so I don't mind running over. But I don't want to leave this topic without spending a little bit more time on how something symbolic can be not just controversial, but actually actively harmful to certain members of society. I'm thinking about, obviously the Mount Rushmore example is a classic example, but there was also, a statue to, I guess the sort of father of gynecology figure.
I heard about that one.
In a park, and this was a guy who did all kinds of experimentation without consent on helpless Black women. And it was, I mean, he was a butcher. And so there was finally a movement to have it taken down, but it's worth considering. And I would say it's even very important to consider how a society honoring a particular person or event can not even unintentionally, but maybe be deliberately trying to tamp down the spirit of the people who were defeated or victimized during that event or by that person.
I mean, a lot of the Confederate monuments that we see today were not built after the Civil War. They were built at the height of the Ku Klux Klan and also again in the 40s and 50s. So that's trying to rewrite history and try to show a version of history that is very harmful to a large segment of our populations. And in a deliberate attempt at propaganda and psychological harm to a stratum of society.
Yep.
So monuments as political weapons.
Yep.
Yeah, I think there's also sort of that defacement of monuments as well. That happens quite a lot. I think maybe or maybe not. Like when you conquer a place, are you going to tear down their statues and their monuments?
Maybe, not necessarily.
It's like that's kind of a maybe. That's maybe.
Well, I mean, I think it's a good question. Something where we could encourage world builders to make a deliberate choice in that.
Because that's
actually this culture is going to take the old monuments and build new monuments holding their hands, or right? I mean, what exactly
or
is
tear them down and build something on top? You know, which is sort of the ultimate screw you of monument building.
Oh dear.
Yeah, destroying other people's monuments or other people's sacred spaces to build a monument either to something in violent opposition or something irrelevant.
Lots of Roman temples getting repurposed as Christian churches in the 4th, 5th, 6th century. And then later on, Hagia Sophia, Christmas church in the 15th century gets repurposed to be a mosque.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. And luckily those were like repurposing rather than
leveling and restarting. Yeah.
Yeah.
And and then there are other kinds of things that there for example are shrines in Japan that are deliberately destroyed and rebuilt on a cycle of, I think it's 7 years, but you would have to go and look that up. But it's a renewal process that is built into the way that the shrine is run. So I think that's actually another kind of interesting.
That's kind of cool
to play around with.
Yeah. And then there's like neglected monuments too, like the statue covered in pigeon poop, where just nobody's cleaning that off for years, and like the city is just fighting about whose job it is.
Well, and you know what? It's interesting. See, all of these things, I think of these things. So whenever you have something symbolic, it's so useful as a world building tool. It's just incredibly useful. And how you treat it and what you do to it and whether you neglect it or whether you take care of it is so emblematic of the society and what's going on in it, and it's super useful. These are the kinds of rich details that can do a lot of work for you as a world builder.
I mean, you can imply, when did the society stop caring about the statue of that general, and what does that say about society that it stopped dealing with it then and it fell into neglect that at that particular time? So yeah, you can imply a lot of history in the life of a monument.
How much forethought is put into caring for a monument once it's built? When you go into the design and the construction and the funding, how many institutions, groups that start these projects actually go in and say, okay, we need these things to construct this thing, but after it's constructed, we will also need to put this into it to maintain it.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, I mean, you do see that with cemeteries, which are not quite the same as monuments.
No.
But you do see very, very deliberate maintenance plans and processes going on in that kind of a context. So it's not entirely inconceivable that a group of people could, and I'm sure that this is actually something that goes on, that that a monument would be given similar thing. It's sort of like the flames that never go out at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, for example.
Yeah.
That's a symbolic way to maintain the monument, I think, as well.
And it's there's some logistics went into that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It took some
Like
planning.
some real planning and some engineering when it went into that, so that it doesn't so you have to refuel it or whatever, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you must.
And I forgot
Fountains.
Fountains
are also monuments, and also people build them, but also sometimes they're actual where people get their water from. So it's your water has been brought to you by so and so who to whom this fountain is dedicated, right?
Yeah, I mean, all the fountains in Rome, for example. I mean, I didn't have to buy soda when I was walking around Rome. I just had a water bottle because there were fountains everywhere, and they all work, and I could just fill my bottle and just keep walking. It was amazing.
Yep. Very, very cool. Well, you guys are awesome. I think we got to wrap this up.
Okay.
Now we have to put the last stone in place of this monument.
That's right. Now you've just made me think of the song "Monument" by Depeche Mode.
Sorry, not sorry.
My monument, it fell down. I suppose you guys don't know that song. It's okay. It's really okay.
I'm of your generation.
Actually, and I have listened to Depeche Mode, just apparently not their entire catalog.
Now you know my secret. Anyway, all right. Well, so next week, I think we're on for the same time and the same day of the week. I don't see why we would not be. I do not have a topic that is fixed in my mind, but I will make sure to disseminate one via the Facebook group before we meet.
Sounds good.
And so I will thank you, and that was fun. And now we're done.
All right. Yay.